This is not the end of your life. It's a hard thing to get through. You will get through it. You're going to survive it. It might be the hardest thing you ever did in your life. You may think it will kill you, but when you get through it, you are going to be the best version of yourself because you will have taught yourself what you can persevere through.
Welcome to The Details with Allison Kahler, a space for real divorce stories and grounded conversations with experts, helping you find clarity and courage as you step into a future that may look different than you expected and better than you thought possible. My guest today is Bree Sullivan-Howell. Bree is a divorce attorney in Georgia and founder of the Sullivan Firm. She's been practicing family law for over 2 decades and has been named one of the 10 best family law attorneys in Georgia. She's also the author of 3 faith-affirming books during divorce, including Crush Your Divorce and Keep Your Faith, and Crush Your Comeback. Let's get on to my conversation with Bree. Welcome to The Details, Bree.
Oh, thank you for having me. Excited to be here.
So excited to have you on. So I actually heard Bree on another podcast that I was listening to a few months ago and immediately started following her on Instagram and knew that I had to have you on the podcast as one of my first guests, just given your deep expertise in family law, but also your perspectives on faith in divorce, which you share about in your 2 books, Crush Your Divorce and Keep Your Faith, and Crush Your Comeback. So we'll get into that in a little bit. But just to start off, can you tell our listeners about the type of work that you do and the types of clients that you serve?
Certainly. I am a family law specialist here in South Georgia. I serve men and women in family law cases, divorces, custody matters, paternal rights cases, child support disputes, any enforcement actions to make sure that final orders get enforced and that people follow their obligations, all of those kinds of things.
Excellent. And what are you most passionate about when you're serving your clients?
I just want people to feel that their voices are heard. I think so often people go to lawyers and they feel like they tell their story to the lawyer and then it gets lost in translation somehow between the first consultation and when it goes to a courtroom. And I try to be very mindful of what my client wants the messaging to be. And then I help them understand how to massage that messaging so that it will work for the courtroom environment, so that we're appropriate. Some things you can't say a certain way in court. So we just work hard on testimony and presentation in terms of evidence and what fits which facts you're trying to prove.
Yeah, to your point on what not to say in court, you have a really great Instagram post or series going right now. And I saw something that you said on there about the phrase, to be honest. So I just that caught on to me. So share that part with folks, because I thought that was just fascinating.
Oh, it drives me crazy, but it works really well when I'm on the other side of it. But when you say, you're testifying beautifully and then you throw in a, to be honest, or I'll just be honest and I'll tell you blah, blah, blah. It just calls into question everything else you've said, as if suddenly you're going to be honest in your testimony. And so it just undermines the credibility a little bit and makes you look a little shaky in your testimony. And it gives that other lawyer just the opportunity to drive a truck through the loophole and just call you out for lying and it really gets you off balance in front of the judge. It's not a good look.
Yeah. So just these colloquialisms that we might say, we don't realize how dangerous they can be. So this is why you want someone like Bree supporting you who has over 20 years of experience in family law. I want to go back to the point that you said before about just, people wanting to feel heard and wanting to get their story across. I think I heard you have something like a 14-page questionnaire or something that you use with your clients. What's the process like when someone comes to you? We were just saying before this call that we're recording this in January. It's divorce month. It's a really busy time. You have a lot of people reaching out to you. What does that intake process look like when you are potentially starting to work with a new client?
Well, we have a 1-hour consultation with a new client, and I've gotten it down to a science after all these years. And this questionnaire is like my masterpiece. And so I get background information, obviously, and all the information we need for the state reports that we have to submit. And anything I think is relevant to a custody battle, if there's going to be one, I kind of get a gauge on how involved it's going to be, whether we're going to be able to resolve it by agreement or not. what kind of feel my client has about where it stands emotionally with everyone, because emotions drive the bus in these cases. If people are feeling rational, then we can get them done a lot faster. If both sides are, you have to have compliance from both sides. But then we get into, laying out all of the assets the parties have to be divided in the case of a divorce, for instance, and then their debts, any concerns about taxes, any concerns about identity protection. I go into that a lot with my clients and remind them to go in and change passwords. And I give lots of cautionary tales in that first meeting because it's no man's land. When you're at a lawyer's office and the other party either doesn't know you're there or knows you're there and is starting to gear up for battle because they know you're there, or they've stalked you on one of these apps like Life 360 or something, and they know you're there and you didn't think to turn off your application. These are important real world issues that you have to maneuver when you go see a lawyer about a divorce. So we go into those things, the practical concerns, the safety concerns of remaining in the same space. I always tell people, don't be afraid to call 911 if you start feeling afraid, and get the reinforcement. Things can just go sideways really quickly in these cases because people are so emotionally charged and fearful, really, about what's happening next.
Yeah. And what do you tell them in that first meeting to help both inform them so, they know what they might not know coming in, but to help alleviate some of that fear?
Well, I think people lose the fear a lot faster if they have a roadmap for what to expect. That unknown factor is the thing that gets people more anxious than anything. If you kind of know the big picture of how it works, like you don't know exactly how it's going to go for you, but if you can get some kind of explanation or roadmap for what to expect in terms of steps in the process, and empowering things the client can do to get everything ready for each step. It's like my dad said, and I put this in my book, stop worrying and start working. The more you can get ahead of something and be proactive and be working toward a goal, you feel like you're taking control of that fear. You feel like you're addressing the thing that's got you nervous. And before you know it, you've got a little arsenal together and you're starting to feel kind of confident about your chances in court. Like, I can do this. Look what I've got to say. Look what I can show to prove what I'm trying to say. Each thing builds on the thing before it. So you get your little checklist. I give everybody a homework list and we work with them to make sure all that stuff comes in. And when it's completed, people are feeling really confident about their chances and about the story they can prove. That's what it is.
Yeah. And for the people that are coming into your office, especially as you think about the folks you're meeting with this month in January, are most of them pretty decided and they're like, let's go do this. They're ready to start that action checklist and start moving through the process? Or are some of them still in that contemplation phase and using that consultation to say, is this just a rough patch after the holidays, or are we really going to go through with this?
It's a mix. But typically people go to a counselor when they're still sorting through it more than they go to an attorney when they're sorting through it. Lawyers are there with legal solutions. I refer people to counselors when I don't think they're ready for the legal solution, but that's really not my niche. I send people to the mental health professionals when it's something I think they can fix. And I do that often. If I don't think someone's ready to be divorced, there are knee-jerk reactions and the client hasn't thought about the repercussions of the decision and they're not ready. I can look at the facts objectively and say, listen, you're just upset about this thing he did or she did, and you're not there yet. Or your spouse is just sick. And this is in sickness and a health issue. If there's an addiction issue or there's a mental health problem or something, I always encourage my clients to have grace for those things before you go straight to the courthouse and call it quits. I just think in fairness and in being just a moral human, we owe each other that after the oath we take to get married to somebody and pledge to be together for life. If it truly is an illness, that's not what I need to be handling. It needs to go to someone who can address illness.
Yeah. I think this is actually a segue to something that I wanted to talk about in your book. But if a lot of people have come into your office, they're ready to move forward, they've done the counseling, and it doesn't mean it's not weighing on their heart. And, with all of the perspectives you bring of faith to your work and your life, there's a Bible passage that's pretty famous, but I think maybe misused, which is God hates divorce. And you talk about this in your book. So can you help us debunk the Malachi myth?
Yeah, it's really talk about above my pay grade. Like, I don't claim to be Beth Moore or any kind of theologian, but I have read the Bible my entire life and I've studied it and been in church my whole life. And I just feel like that verse is taken out of context and it's used to shame people, and that in a way that's not appropriate. I talk about this in my book. God hates a lot of things. And there are places in the Bible where we're hearing lists of things God hates, and divorce is not in that list. He hates other things maybe more. I don't want to speak for him, but it seems to me that, based on the character of Jesus, if you get into the New Testament and you really read how he loved women and elevated them in society and revered them and honored them as humans. And I mean, men too, humankind. He was that way with everyone, even the worst of the sinners. He was loving and welcoming. And I think that whole mantra of God hates divorce, you're going to go to hell if you get divorced, all of that kind of mindset just sort of makes Christianity get the worst name, And I think people stay married in abusive situations that they should leave a lot of times, that God would have them leave for their own well-being and to give them the blessings he has in store for them, because they're afraid of spiritual backlash from people around them. Yeah. And it's really sad. I see it an awful lot. And especially women being abused physically sometimes, or even encouraged to stay, like it was a one-off or something, and then they end up really injured. So we don't talk about that enough in our society, and especially not in the church, which is why I wrote the book I wrote, partly because I see the Christians struggling with it in my office, and they start feeling like God will turn his back on them if they leave their marriages, which I just don't believe that. Not my Jesus. I don't think that's who my Jesus is.
Yeah. And you actually say in your book, there's a section that says, sometimes God's answer is no. And there's a passage I'm actually going to read from it because I found it so profound, as you talk a little bit about your own divorce experience. And you say, by the end of my marriage, I was living each day literally looking forward to death. Not in the suicidal sense, but because I just couldn't wait to be in heaven where there would be no more tears, just joy. I thought my struggle would earn me some kind of crown in the afterlife. I yearned so deeply to run into his arms and hear those sweet words from Matthew, well done, my good and faithful servant. Praise God, my story didn't end there. Yours won't either, friend.
Yes.
I was just like, wow, when I read that. And so just as you think about some women who are maybe women or men that are in, those early phases of like, yes, this is the right decision, but, like, how can I go through with this with my faith? Like, what's your message to them?
Well, first of all, I would just encourage them to seek the Lord in their low places, because your faith doesn't grow when things are going great. Your faith grows. I feel like I'm an old lady now and I can speak this kind of wisdom. I don't know.
By the way, you say you're an old lady, but for those that are listening to this and not watching on YouTube, Bree is absolutely gorgeous and not an old lady. So check out the visuals. Go on.
Well, what I tell them, though, is that your faith grows when you're down. That is the truth of human life. Anybody who's been through something hard will tell you that. And it's how you manage the low spots that creates character and perseverance and hope for your future. And I'm telling you, once you've been somewhere really low like that and you've gotten real with God, your relationship with him is never the same again. It's always better. It's like a deepening of your connection spiritually. And it's hard to explain until you've done it. But I think if you harness your energies that way and you think that way about it, think of struggling and pain as a mercy, like a means of growth, our spiritual lives are the thing that matter the most because we're going to take our souls with us when we die and nothing else. And where's that soul going to land is the big question everybody has to wrestle with. But I know where I want my soul to be. And I know that my Lord was with me through my hard spots. And that's where I really grew. I've grown every time I've had a hard time in life. So look at it like that. That's one of the best silver linings of going through a bad time like a divorce is that it's awful and painful, but you connect in a new way spiritually. Yeah. And when you come out of it, it's like you feel like you're like invincible. Like nothing can kill me. Like nothing can hurt me. Even if you did kill me, I'm okay. I'm going to heaven. Like I'm fine. And that's a real freeing feeling. It is so liberating not to be worried about that, to know that God's been there with me. He's shown me. He showed up for me. I got through that hard thing and now I'm okay. I thought I would die and I didn't. It's just totally beautiful. And I can't wait to get to heaven and say, like, Jesus, tell me what was happening in 2017. Like, let's talk about 2017.
Let's look back on that time.
What was the whole story that I wasn't seeing? Because it's fascinating. You think of it that way from an eternal perspective. All of our lives are just a story.
Yeah.
And we don't know the whole story.
Not yet. It'll be revealed to us in the end. Yeah, I mean, that resonates with me so deeply. I've shared this in some of the earlier episodes that our listeners will have heard, but I grew up Catholic. And so I had the whole Catholic guilt, Catholic shame elements, which, I think some of that can be religious programming from the church and less of kind of what Jesus or God would want me to feel. But yeah, my faith was tested, but I think I've come out the other side a lot stronger because of this experience. I had a pretty charmed life growing up. I didn't have a lot of hardship, to be totally honest. And that may be like frustrating or annoying to hear to some people, but I think my divorce was like the first really big thing in my life that felt like a true failure. And like I had done something wrong and bad. And so I think it is definitely something that revealed to me that my faith can grow through the process. So appreciate you sharing that. I want to talk a little bit about the book, which is fantastic and highly recommend that people get into it. But, I picked it up for the first time and I was like, oh, written by an attorney. It's probably going to jump straight into the divorce process and all of that. And that's actually not until like part 3 in the book. The first part is all about what you call the pregame and getting your head on straight, facing your fears. What are some of the things that you recommend people think about, address before they even get into the legal process itself?
You just have to become unemotional. You have to somehow learn to compartmentalize that and put that emotional component in a corner of your brain and only go there every now and then, because you've got to be focused on the big picture business transaction of it. To be successful, you get one shot. So I spend section 1 of my book kind of giving tips for things you can do to get your mind right. To expect losing friends, to expect those hard things that are going to happen to you, to make sure your behavior is acceptable to a judge, because people get separated from their spouse and they go hog wild sometimes. And they lose their minds temporarily, and that's a natural thing. But I have to rein them back in. And I'm like, no cake stands. Like, we can't, you're being videoed and photographed at the bar. Like, I can't have this, Or they're talking to new people or being hit on and they're kind of enjoying the attention and too early. No, because there's a record of all of it. And so this first section of the book is just written like a big sister telling a little brother or sister, get yourself together. We're going to get through this, but you've got to do X, Y, and Z. Here are some pointers on how to get there. And then section 2 is all about abuse. If you've been abused, if you expect more abuse. And sometimes you think getting separated will alleviate the abuse, but it just ratchets up in a new form. So only now they have the court system as a tool to abuse you.
Yeah. So let's actually talk about that, because this was something I'm fortunate that there was no abuse in my situation at all. And I know others aren't so fortunate, but I'm familiar with physical abuse, sexual abuse as topics, but something I wasn't really familiar with was the term legal abuse.
And so,
Hmm.
can you define for our listeners what is legal abuse and what are the things you can do to watch out for if that might be part of your situation?
Yeah, legal abuse involves the use of the court systems, filing of motions, extensive discovery requests that are not warranted, unnecessary hearings under auspices of this is the issue. We need to sort this out with the court. And then you get there and there's not a lot to it. To ratchet up the other party's attorney's fees and make it where they can't afford to keep playing the game. So they
Mhm.
end up giving in a settlement that they don't need to accept just to stop the bleeding financially.
Mhm.
People who are legal abusers will take positions that they don't really care about. Like often the person, the abusive person, is not interested in having children in their care at all, but they know
Mhm.
you care about that. And so they make that the hill they die on just to hurt you, just to make
Yeah.
you upset, just to make you give in on something financial or something they really do want. So it's a big smoke and mirrors game. That's just one example, but it
Yeah.
happens all the time.
Well, and to your earlier point about the need to sort of calm your emotions because this is a business transaction, I imagine that type of legal abuse is exactly the
Mhm.
kind of thing that could get people super riled up. So, how do you coach and guide people if they're on the receiving end of this legal abuse?
Well, first of all, you've got to let your attorney handle it. And there are
Yeah.
motions you can file if you perceive that the proceedings are being enlarged unnecessarily. There are things you can do, but it takes a lot to get there. You can't, everybody's afforded discovery, everybody gets a chance to have their claims heard. So it doesn't become really excessive and abusive until you're down the road a good distance. But a good rule of thumb is to keep your communications limited. So they want you to react. That's why they do it. They want you to react and show your fanny and get yourself in trouble with your reaction. And then
Hmm.
that's called reactive abuse sometimes. You may have heard that term. And then
I
you become
haven't.
the
No.
and then you
Oh, God.
become the abuser. You become the one they're accusing of abuse because your reaction is crazy. And admittedly, it can look crazy when a person hits their breaking point and they're losing their minds over all of that wasted time and attacking. Like they hold it in a long time and then they explode.
Hmm.
And that's when the video starts running or the text messages are captured or whatever.
Yeah.
So I caution my clients, just keep your mouth shut. If you can't say something totally above board you want a judge to see, don't say it. Just
Yeah.
shut your mouth, call your mother, don't lash out. Call somebody else, let it go vent somewhere else that's safe.
Yeah.
Or call me or let me react to the thing and say, get your client in line. This is not
Yeah.
appropriate. What's happening right now? There are ways to handle it, but you've got to be wise. And that's part of section 1 of my book. Like, you've got to control your emotions, number one,
Yeah.
to be successful. You can't let them rule you.
Yeah. And it's not to say that you're not allowed to have emotions. Emotions are a huge part of this process, but it's just
Sure.
how you, as you said, release those emotions and how you
Yeah.
share them. So I'm sure we'll have other guests on that will talk about, what are some of those tools and tricks to regulate emotions during that time.
Hmm.
What are maybe some of the rights that individuals have? And I'm sure it's different state by state in Georgia where you practice versus California where I live. But what are maybe some of the rights that people have that they may not be aware of to protect themselves? So, I mean, you mentioned, for example, earlier, if somebody's trying to run up the other's attorney's fees, if you're, not the primary breadwinner in the family, or if you've been primarily at home raising the children and not earning income, are there things that people have that they may not be aware of to support themselves through that process?
Well, you always file a motion asking for fees if you're in that position. If
Okay.
the other party has the money to fund your life in two households, that's the hardest thing for some people is that you're going
Hmm.
from one household with one income and then you split into two and there's not enough money to
Yeah.
cover two households, rent, utilities, mortgages, all the things. But in our state, and it varies from state to state, obviously, but here it's
Hmm.
dictated by the one party's true need demonstrated in the evidence and the history, and the other party's ability to pay. So if you have those two things, you can make a plausible argument for fees to be awarded. in terms of just maintenance of a person's daily existence who's not working and making their own income, at least where I practice, we have a standing order that requires, and I think a lot of jurisdictions have these, it requires the breadwinning spouse to continue paying the same bills historically paid by the breadwinner, so that that spouse that's dependent doesn't just get starved out. The same bills get paid, the home remains managed the same way. Money keeps going into the account like it always did. They let it go out like it always did. They pay for the children like they always did. At least locally, you get in some hot water where I practice if you just suddenly cut off somebody's health insurance or cut off their cell phone. And that happens out of spite sometimes. But that's forbidden where I practice. And I think a lot of judges have become wise to that now and have protected the folks that it impacts.
Yeah. Talk to us a little bit about alimony. I have some friends that are at various phases of the divorce process, and that's something that at least they were sharing with me was really confusing for them. That's not something that was part of my divorce settlement, but it kind of feels like a black box to some of my friends who are going through it. Is there any way of like knowing or estimating that ahead of time as you're going through the process, or like how is alimony decided?
It's the same analysis. It's the need and the ability. The need on one side, the ability to pay on the other.
Got it.
And where I practice, it's becoming harder and harder to get it.
Oh, interesting.
It's
Say more.
More and more expected in this day and time, at least where I am. It used to be you could get a lifetime alimony award to a spouse who had been a stay-at-home parent for years and years. It was just kind of a foregone conclusion. Like in the early 80s, it was the last time I saw it be a lifetime award. But
oh, wow.
I wasn't practicing then. I wasn't practicing then, but the orders would come across my desk, for things to enforce or whatever. And that was really the last time I saw a lifetime alimony award, because generally it's expected that everybody work.
Yeah.
In this day and time, I mean, the women's liberation movement made it that way, where everybody has equal opportunity, everybody's expected to support themselves to some degree. And a lot of our judges are women. So they really don't have a lot of tolerance most of the time for these women who aren't willing to go out and work in the event of a breakup.
Yeah. And you talk about that a little bit in your second book, Crush Your Comeback, around, what to be thinking about if you have been someone who's been primarily at home and not earning financially in the household. Maybe just share one or two tips for the folks that might find themselves in that position of, not having lifetime alimony and needing to think about reentering the workforce.
Well, you try to get rehabilitative alimony, which is the thing we typically can pull off. And for a period of time, we try to give you a runway toward liftoff. Like when you're taking off in an airplane, envision that. You need a little runway of support before you can go and spread your wings and fly on your own. So that's what we try to accommodate. We try to get enough support and payment of obligations so that you can stay secure in your home, meet your basic obligations as you figure out what you're going to do next. And these gray divorces where people are older, they have Social Security coming, and we factor that in. You need to know how much you can expect from that if it's still solvent by the time we get there, So far, so good. So you keep hoping it'll be there. But you try to get that rehabilitative alimony base in place in your order. And then you just start immediately planning, like, what am I good at? What could I make money doing? Where would I enjoy working? Because everybody's got some kind of gifting, some kind of skill set, some kind of history or education or experience in some part of life. It's just parlaying those skills that you've accumulated into a money-making opportunity that people kind of struggle with. But that's the name of the game. If you can figure it out, you're fine. And you find fulfillment that way in a new way you didn't expect sometimes, when your life was one thing before you got divorced and now you've got to start over.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that can be one of the hardest things, is just it feels like the life you once knew has totally been flipped on its head, and there's so much change. It's not just the change in your relationship or kind of what the parenting situation is going to be, but your job, where you're living, it comes with all of these other life transitions as well. What should people do if they're early on in this divorce process and just trying to get their arms around, what their rights are, or, are there resources or things that you generally point people to, or is that mostly what you include on that checklist that you mentioned that you share with your clients?
Well, it's just really important to meet with an attorney in your area who knows your local courts and knows the local norms of family law to get insight into that. I can't give legal advice on a podcast or to the masses because it's different everywhere. I wouldn't try to do that. But I think it's important to meet with an attorney who knows what they're doing, with whom you feel comfortable sharing all the truth of your story, good, bad, and ugly, because we need to know it all to represent you well. The last thing you want is your lawyer shocked in court about some indiscretion of yours. You want it not to be all over their faces if something comes out in court.
Do you find that people are coming into your office in this world of ChatGPT and Gen AI being like, well, I looked this up online and ChatGPT told me XYZ. Is that happening a lot in your practice?
That's happening, and it drives me freaking crazy because ChatGPT is a moron when it comes to a lot of these things. I mean, truly, it seems so smart. Like it can just spit out all this beautiful stuff, and it gets things right a lot of the time, but sometimes not. I just actually just today, I'm glad you brought this up, just today. And you can tell by the font because people are lazy and they don't change the font of ChatGPT. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So today I got this email response from an opposing litigant who is representing, I'm not going to say the gender, himself, herself. And it is some ChatGPT regurgitation, if I've ever seen it. And it is nonsense. And it's not even legal. It's not even like close to being accurate in terms of like citing the statute and whatever. And I cannot wait to go to court on that one. It's going to be super fun.
By the way, it's funny that you mentioned that, like, I can't wait to go to court, because you posted on Instagram recently with like your walkout song.
Oh,
which was what?
It was Barracuda by Heart. It's my favorite.
I love it. Yeah. So you want someone like Bree who knows the law, who's way better than ChatGPT. I mean, it's interesting because, I reflect back when I was going through the experience. I've, said before, I'm a relatively well-resourced, well-educated individual. And I was going through the process in Chicago at the time. And it was so hard for me to navigate through all of the legal jargon and, the online stuff. And so I was thinking in my head, I was like, God, it would have been so great to have had ChatGPT to go through it. But it sounds like that, it's a real double-edged sword based on what you just said, which is like, hey, maybe you can use that to start to navigate things, but you got to be really careful to leave the expertise to people like you who know the process and the things like we talked about at the beginning of, phrases that are going to get you in trouble. And you need someone like an attorney by your side to really navigate you through the process.
Yeah. It's not that easy. It's not.
Yeah.
It seems
there's a reason you went to law school for all those years.
Well, and you have to, the problem with representing yourself is that you've never been in that setting, and there are split second on your feet decisions to be made in an instant. As they come at you, you've got to pivot, respond, transition, get the right evidence together, have it all lined up, and have a plan for how to do that, or have a feel for how you should do that before it happens. The ones who represent themselves just don't have that training and that experience necessary to manage it on the spot. And so they end up stammering and getting they get all caught up in thinking about what just happened, and they can't formulate a response. And then the judge just keeps going. Like, they aren't going to wait on you to come up with something to say. So you end up looking unprepared. Or you're not the one to be believed.
Yeah. And one thing I love about your books is that you share different vignettes about, fictionalized clients. None of this is, real stories or anything, but it's sort of amalgamations of different people that you've worked with over time, which is part of what I'm hoping to do with the details here too, is to tell stories, because I think that's how people learn. Are there one or two horror stories that come to mind of based on what you were just sharing of when stuff has gone really wrong? So it's almost like cautionary tales that you would share with the listeners.
One big thing people do, and I don't know it because I'm not in the case when it happens, is they sign a decree and finalize their case that leaves things out, or they agree to things they shouldn't agree to that you can't undo. So, I mean, at least where we are, you can't undo property division. That's not something you can ever modify. You can modify alimony if you don't waive the right to modify it, and you can modify child support, but you can't modify division of property and debts. And so if you don't remember a certain debt, or if you don't check your credit report, and I preach the credit report to everybody who'll listen, if you don't know what the debts are in your name, when you get divorced, that's bad business because you're stuck with them. And what if your spouse put a debt in your name you don't know about? Or there's a tax lien out there you didn't look for. Something like that, you're stuck with it. And so that's the biggest problem I see is people sign things they shouldn't sign, trusting the other party, not remembering that they are now plaintiff versus defendant. It's not Mr. and Mrs. anymore. It is you versus me. And you've got to realize that you're in danger if you don't get good advice before you sign.
Yeah. And I'm sure none of this is to scare people, but just to say, like, don't let the desire to get done with the process and through the process rush you through something, and make sure you're leaning on the right experts. I know you've referenced certified divorce financial analysts. I'm going to have one of those on the podcast soon to talk through that process, but it's really important to get your homework done ahead of time to get all of the information about your different accounts and that understanding, so you can go in eyes wide open and not make some of those irreversible decisions and mistakes.
Those are good people to have, especially in complex matters. And if you have a family business, that's a whole other layer to be peeled back. It's important to get the forensic people involved to put values on those things, because a business can have a significant value nobody's ever considered or looked into or analyzed. And if you're just saying, oh, I don't want anything to do with that business, just let them keep it, you're maybe giving up a multi-million-dollar asset that ought to be at least on the spreadsheet that you make up somewhere else by getting more of the other property. So that's what people aren't thinking. They're thinking, oh, that's to be too hard for me to take that asset. Or I don't want that rental property. Ugh, such a headache. Well, honey, that rental property is paying for itself, and it's going to be a great asset for retirement. I try to help my clients retrain their thinking on some of those things. If you've never run a business or had to worry about the finances of your household, which is a lot of people. I mean, a lot of people rely on the spouse to do that. And it's men and women, both ways. If you've never worked on it and you don't know the numbers and how it all functions, you're one step behind. So those people need the financial experts that you just mentioned.
Absolutely. And one of the parts of your book is top 10 negotiation tips. So not to spoil all of them that are in the book, but are there kind of 1 to 2 that you might want to share with our listeners today as they're in that negotiation space?
Well, there are several, there are 10 that I highlighted there, but you don't give away your bottom line ever. Some people will start their negotiation with their spouse at the kitchen table and say, listen, as long as I get the house, I'm fine. You can have everything else. That's all I care about. That's all I really care about. The kids in the house. It's so stupid to do that, because then that gets filed away in their mind and they go and tell their lawyer all she really wants is the house. And then that informs the rest of the negotiation. So don't give away your bottom line. I always say, you start way right of where you really are willing to land. You ask for way more than you're willing to accept, because you got to leave that room. That room for negotiation is important.
Yeah.
And the other thing is, you've got to realize when it's time to give up the thing that doesn't really matter for your peace to be preserved and restored, because you can't put a price on peace. And that's the X factor, or like the wild card or the variable in every negotiation that I handle. It's different for every person. What is the thing that's driving you crazy? You're just in so much turmoil in this case, like in this paradigm of fighting with your ex, and you just want out of it so badly. Everybody's got their breaking point. And you get to that point, it's like, I don't care what it costs me. Just get me out of this. You don't want to get there too soon. You got to be mindful of that and be wise, but there is a little price on peace. And sometimes I tell people, give up the rest of that $20,000 you wanted or that attorney's fees award. You can make payments to me. Let's just get you done, and that's important to remember. Your peace has a value. And if you remain married and you don't settle quickly, you end up in a trial. And talk about soul shattering. Going to a divorce trial is miserable, and it's days of your life.
For people that are not familiar with what that is, like what is a divorce trial, and how's that different than a quote unquote normal divorce?
Well, trial is just what you have to do if you can't settle. And so you do, at least where I practice, we do a temporary hearing to nail down basic needs kind of being addressed early on to carry us through until we can finalize all the big things, like who gets the assets, who pays the bills, what the child support is, where the children are, all that. And if we can't work out every single one of those things, if you don't have a deal on everything, you don't have a deal on anything. So we try mediation. We get a mediator involved. We try to settle that way. But if that doesn't work, the last resort is to go to a judge and air out all the reasons you're there and how you were treated and why you're getting divorced and why you're the better party, why you're the victim of the situation, and both parties feel that way usually. Yeah. So it's just an airing of all the harmful, hurtful experiences and reliving it, and your kids relive it if you have them, and then you don't have control over the outcome. So it's just you pay a ton of money to damage each other emotionally, and then in the end, you're not happy with the result. So it's just not good. It's not good at all. I try to settle all the cases that I can.
It's super helpful just learning some of the terminology here, because I'm certainly not a lawyer. I have a business background, but I heard from one of my other podcast guests that in California, 95% of cases settle. And so I think what I'm hearing you say is that hire an attorney regardless, but you don't hire an attorney just to go to trial. You hire an attorney hopefully to settle so that you don't have to go to trial in most cases. Is that the right interpretation? Yeah.
Yeah. And I think probably the better attorneys are the ones who are able to foster settlement, who encourage that more than going to court. I don't want to go to court and lose control of the outcome. I like being able to control the outcome for my client and feel like I got the best case scenario we could. Mm-hmm. It's just an expensive, what's behind door number 2 proposition to go to court and trust a judge who doesn't know you and will get a period of hours to get to know you before deciding everything in your life. When you back up from it, you realize it's just very unwise.
Yeah. Well, and I will say, when I was going through the process, our process was not super complex, but I think I wasn't in the headspace of let me go interview multiple different attorneys, find the best fit for me. I joke around sometimes. I was like, I interviewed more florists for our wedding than I did interview divorce lawyers to end our marriage. And I think it was just because I was in this place of, I just want to pick someone, I want it, and I want it to be done. And so, how would you guide people to find the right attorney for them? Like what you just described sounds really compassionate, really even keeled. But for people who are maybe going through this process blind and not sure how to pick the right lawyer, find the right fit for them, what are some things they might be looking for as they're potentially considering you as their attorney or finding another person?
Well, first off, you need a family law expert. You need a specialist. You don't need someone who just dabbles in it, because it is an all-consuming area of the law. Mm-hmm. So most of the state bar associations have a membership directory online, and you can look and see if they belong, if each attorney you look at in your area belongs to the family law section. That's what we call it in Georgia, or like their family law subset of attorneys in the state. Because if you're in a section like that, you get the updates on the law, and it shows an interest or a concentration in that area where you are. The other thing that you can do is look at reviews online for people who have used a given attorney before and see if what's being said about that attorney resonates with your soul. Is this my kind of person? If you don't want, some people just don't want like a really aggressive lawyer. They want one that's just going to be really easygoing and not rock the boat too much and just do it real peacefully and cheaply and all that. If you need somebody who's a fighter, I think that will show up in the reviews. You know, people will say, this person went to court with me and they fought for me and it was awesome or whatever. So in this day and time, you can check that. And I think that's a good fit. But I think you're right. Most people go to the first attorney. And if they like them, okay, they go with that because it's so painful to relive the whole story over and over, to go meet with new people and download it. I mean, it's an emotional siege to talk about it, like with a total stranger. So most people do it once and they're done.
Well, I can tell how great you are with your clients, I'm sure, just from today's conversation. So Bree, as we get close to wrapping up our conversation today, I'm curious for folks that might be in that January phase, getting ready to file, people that are kind of midway through the process, or as they're crushing their comeback, maybe, you know, in the years following a divorce, what do you hope sticks with them from today's conversation?
Well, I hope I've imparted some kind of wisdom, and I want people to have hope. Like, this is not the end of your life. It's a hard thing to get through. You will get through it. You're going to survive it. It might be the hardest thing you ever did in your life. You may think it will kill you, but when you get through it, you are going to be the best version of yourself because you will have taught yourself what you can persevere through. That was my whole story. I was not the person you see now before my divorce. It totally transformed my life. And in the best of ways, it was like I've reconnected with who I always was. And I've honed in on the person I want to be and pursuing those things that matter and that are purposeful. And when you walk in your purpose, there's no stopping you.
Yeah. Beautifully said. And, you know, something that stuck with me from your book, Crush Your Comeback, was, you know, once you're on the other side, that you use what you learn to serve others. I'm getting a little emotional saying it, but that's what I know that you're doing in your life. And that's what I'm very much hoping to do with this podcast. So Bree, with that, thank you so much for being on the podcast today. And so looking forward to being in each other's lives going forward.
Yeah, it's been a real, genuine pleasure. I've totally enjoyed this time with you.
Thanks for listening to The Details with Allison Kahler. If this episode resonated with you, be sure to follow the show wherever you listen to podcasts. And please consider sharing it with someone who might benefit from it. New episodes drop every Tuesday.